The death of 41-year-old lawyer Omobolanle Raheem, who was gunned down by a drunk police officer in the Ajah area of Lagos State, is generating reactions. The deceased was 7 months pregnant before her tragic murder. She was shot while her husband was looking for a place to park as directed by the policeman. The suspect and his accomplices have been arrested and moved to Yaba for trial, with the Nigeria Bar Association promising that they would see to the full arrest of the perpetrators. Omobolanle's killing has once again brought to the front burner issues of police brutality and extrajudicial killing, which culminated in the EndSARS protest of October 2020. Do men of the Nigeria police force need psychological evaluation? Well, joining me now is a clinical psychologist, Miracle Ihuoma, and legal practitioner, S.A. James Omokaru. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you.
Let me begin with you, Miracle. When you...
Essie.
Oh, you're Essie. You're Miracle. Oh, why did I think that was you? When you heard what happened, I'm wondering what came to mind psychologically. What do you think could have happened to the police officer?
Well, we could only permutate because, of course, we would need to do a proper psychological evaluation to know exactly what happened. It might not be psychological, it might be, right? A study, for instance, of about 167 killings or shootings in America, for instance, showed that about 65 of those killings, of those people who were involved in those killings, had psychological issues. Right, just about 17 did not or were cleared out. Others were not, were somewhere in between. We're not sure and all of that. So after psychological evaluation, we can then say that this man was actually dealing with a psychological issue or the other. So we can only permutate. Yeah, so it's very possible actually that he was actually dealing with a psychological disorder or a psychological issue at the time of that shooting. I'll give you an example of a man named Charles Whitman. Charles Whitman was a good man, family man, until 1966 when he woke up and then shot his wife, killed his son, and killed about 25 other people. And when an evaluation was done, in fact, a CT scan was done, and it was showed that there was a tumor around what we call amygdala, the amygdala part of the brain, which is involved in emotional responses and involved in things like aggression, right? So that's explained why that man who, was a good man until 1966 became a killer, right? So that's an example of how psychology can affect people's behavior. Yeah, so I can say that it's possible that, especially if we look at his track record, to say, okay, who was this police officer before this event? Right. Because when we talk about mental health or mental illness, you want to look at deviation from norm. Who was this guy before this shooting? If this guy was a normal police officer, somebody who was not aggressive, somebody who was, who handled himself properly, then we want to ask questions. Okay, so what happened on that particular day?
Because one would expect that someone who has 33 years of experience, that would come to play, unlike other persons who might have lesser years of working experience, that, okay, over the time, he would have understood how to manage situations like that. Yes. And so one would begin to wonder, although it was reported that he might have been under the influence of alcohol at the time. So that also comes to play. Yeah. All right. Let me bring you in now, S.A. James Omokaru. Now, I wonder how the legal body is handling this matter as it stands, because one of them has been taking, and this is not the first time we are having reports of extrajudicial killings and the EndSARS matter, but that's not the issue. How is the legal community managing this matter?
Well, right now, the Nigerian Bar Association, various branches like the Ikeja Bar, the Lagos Bar, the Ekpe branch, even the national body have taken it upon themselves to ensure that this case will be different. statements have been issued, visitations have been done. But I want to say here that we're not going to end at that point this time around, because we've had this kind of situations before and it keeps reoccurring, it keeps happening and happening and happening. We've been saying things, it keeps happening. We want to push further this time around. We are saying that it shouldn't end at this stage. We want to take it further by ensuring that there is police reforms. We want to ensure that evaluation, medical evaluation, mental evaluation of these police officers is being done regularly, so we don't keep having this kind of cases over and over again. Now, this case is that of Omobolanle. We learned that 2 weeks ago, in that same police station, someone was killed as well. And we didn't hear about it so much, maybe because the person involved is not a legal practitioner. Now, we don't know how many of such incidents has happened in the past. We talked about the officer being 30 years, he has been in
33 years in service.
33 years in service. Now, this brings the issue of how many people he must have even killed others before now. But this is the one that has come to bear. This one is the one that everybody has heard about. That's why the searchlight is on him now. So this brings up so many issues. What do we do to ensure that this kind of situation does not reoccur? So we want to ensure that we push further. We ensure that steps are taken. First of all, we look at the issue of recruitment of the police. The issue of recruiting based on ethnicity, tribalism, quota system, those kind of petty considerations should not be at the front burner. Before recruitment, the police should ensure that they are looking at merit, they are looking at character, the character of this individual, not one oga at the top sending 10 names. When you have situations like that, you see that they are reporting to that oga at the top. You know, so these are issues that we want to see how we can bring to the front burner.
Yeah.
Sorry, there should be a reform. We should start from the recruitment process. Recruitment must be standardized. There must be a high level of professionalism while recruiting police officers, people of character. Then apart from that, we want a situation where there will be periodic medical and mental evaluation of these police officers. With what he has explained, you understand now that with time, a person may be in his proper mental state, but maybe with time, due to the rigors of the job or maybe health decline, things can happen. So there should be periodic mental evaluation of these police officers. It can be once in 4 months. Bring them out, check them to see if they are fit, because we are dealing with lives here. We cannot continue to lose lives all the time. So we have to ensure that we get it right this time. Periodic mental evaluation of these police officers. Once we do this, then I believe it will go a long way in ensuring that these situations do not reoccur.
She mentioned something, a person of character. And I'm wondering, from your experience, what would be the ideal character a police officer who engages with citizens on the street, who is on the field, should have?
Okay, that's a pretty good question. I would say, just like she has mentioned, that mental health evaluation is done, right? That can detect some of these things, because people have tendencies, right? And sometimes tendencies does not automatically play out to be character or behavior.
Right.
But when you are subjected to evaluation, then we can now spot it and say, okay, this person has these tendencies, right? This person has this tendency for aggression, has tendency for this type of behavior. So can we then maybe place this person in more training or some form of therapy or counseling or whatever this person might need, so that this person can become a better person, right? So these are some of the things that need to be done in that direction. And I don't know if it's done. I doubt it. I doubt it's done, right? Because of a lot of things that are going on in that space, right? So we need to check for these things so that we are sure that these people are fit to carry out their duties as police, because that's a very sensitive job, actually.
Yes.
You are dealing with lives, you're dealing with properties, you have, because the man with gun is the most powerful person in the room in that sense. So it gives you a sense of power and prestige that you have a gun, and you can tell someone to sit and he sits, and tell someone to stand and he stands. So if you are not psychologically stable, it could actually affect you, in the negative. So it's important that these people are checked, and be sure that they are psychologically stable and mentally fit to carry out that role as a police officer.
For better clarity, when you talk about psychological stability, what are we looking at?
Okay, so let me first of all start by defining what mental health is,
Right.
and then maybe span into some instruments that can come in handy in this psychological evaluation that we're talking about. So World Health Organization has defined mental health as the ability of an individual to be able to realize his or her potential.
Okay.
Right? Potential being what you can do that you have not yet done, or what you can be that you have not yet been. Realize his potential, is able to cope with the normal stresses of life. Right? So the individual who is mentally stable is the one who's able to cope with the normal stress of life. It's not the person who wishes away stress, but is able to cope with it, right? Because, and of course, how you also cope with stress matters, because a lot of the times there's what we call positive coping mechanisms and negative coping mechanisms.
Interesting.
Right. So people have positive coping mechanisms and negative coping mechanisms. I define a negative coping mechanism as a mechanism rather that needs another type of coping mechanism to cope with. So whenever you need another type of coping mechanism to cope with your current coping mechanism, you know that it's a negative coping mechanism. An example is, so I have a stressful job as a police officer, and because of this stressful job, I have to maybe work late at night, so I resort to drinking to cope with this stress of life.
Right.
Now I need another type of coping mechanism to cope with my drinking issue, right? So that itself becomes or makes it negative. So that's a negative coping mechanism. So you now want to look at what are the positive coping mechanisms. So can you use things like exercise instead that would have an ultimate side effect to cope with that particular stress that you're facing. So that's the second part of that definition. Then it now says that that individual must be able to work productively and fruitfully. And then lastly, must then be able to contribute meaningfully to his community or to his society.
Right.
Now, these are the parameters for judging if somebody is mentally stable or not, amongst others, right? Then talking about some of these evaluations that we're talking about. So for instance, there are some evaluations that once you administer to, we have if personality assessments, for instance, can show traces. There's what we call Minnesota Multiphasic Inventory. That's MMPI2. Right, that inventory, for instance, shows certain tendencies like type A personality. So if somebody is a type A personality, somebody who's aggressive, who feels like he's superior to other people, it will reveal it, right? And once it reveals it, you know this is a red flag. This person should not be, because we all know that there are different fits for different roles in organizations and in the society. Even in working in TVC, for instance, it's not every kind of personality can function properly in this type of setting, this type of organization. So that's one of the reasons we do evaluation, to discover and check for fits for certain types of job roles, right? So once that is done, then you now know, okay, this person is not a perfect fit for this organization or for this role. Then can we reassign this person? Can we take this person for more training? Can we take this person for therapy or something like that? Yeah.
Oh, right. Interesting analysis that you have given now, because it brings to mind that perhaps the stress this policemen face, could it also contribute to what we are seeing now from all you have said? Definitely. An average policeman is stressed. That's the truth. This is not in defense of what this police officer did, right? But an average police officer in Nigeria is stressed. Number one, an average police officer in Nigeria buys his uniform. Right, he doesn't have adequate uniform. I've gone to repair my shoe before, and I saw a policeman repairing his shoe. The shoe was badly torn. Right, that's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be in an economy or in a country that is working. Right, so those are examples of stresses they face.
Some of these guys, of course, result in corruption to make ends meet. Because how much is the salary of a police officer, right? Some of them have children in the university, and they have to do whatever it takes. All of this places stress on them. And once stress, because stress, all illnesses, 70% of all illnesses are traced to stress. 70%. What the organization says. 70% of all illnesses, both mental health issues, mental illnesses are traced to stress. Once they are stressed, they will malfunction. Anybody who is stressed malfunctions. For instance, if you haven't slept for 3 days, I'm sure it will show in how you deliver your job.
Absolutely.
That's the truth. You become cranky. You become you are on the edge because you haven't slept, right? That's how sleep, for instance, affects your psychological well-being and affects your behavior as well, right? So these are examples of how these things can affect you. Talk more of an average police officer out there.
Right. Now, he has mentioned a whole lot.
Yes.
And we have been talking about reforms in the police over the years in this country.
Yes.
But all we are saying, from what he has said, are we really tackling it from the root? Are we addressing it from the root with the number of things he has mentioned?
The truth is that we are not actually tackling it. We have a long way to go, and we really need to start immediately. Now, I'm going to give an example of the Apple 6, the killing that happened in 2005. This is 17 years now. Till now, I cannot say justice has been served. In 2017, two of the officers were found guilty. Now, they have not been sentenced to death yet. Then, the most senior officer, the person who even gave the command, the courts found him innocent. Now, an appeal has been filed against that particular judgment, but you know that the police has reinstated that officer. This is what we are talking about. The police itself, I say they've been issuing statements on condemning what has happened, they want to do. Are they really serious? Are they determined to ensure that this kind of case does not reoccur? The police has to really ensure that this kind of thing stop happening. So that incident of the Apple 6 is a clear indication that we have a very long way to go. Whether the police is really sincere, those are issues we really have to look at. Now, I was told that 3 people were arrested a few days ago in respect of this murder. Now, 2 were released. I was told that they were released because they were not the one that took the shot. But information we got is that they were there when it happened, they ran away. Is that the kind of police we should have? Why should they have run away when an incident like that happened? So for them to have released those 2 people immediately is already a bad sign as far as I'm concerned. But we're going to call upon the Nigerian police to ensure that what has been happening in other cases does not happen in this case, because the world is watching. The world is watching. We cannot continue like this. Now, those 2 individuals that were allowed to leave, why would they be allowed to leave? Don't they owe a duty of care? Their duty is to protect life and property. Now, when Omobolanle was shot, instead of running away, are there no rules they ought to have played there? But instead, they were allowed to go. So the police itself, so far, they have not shown that they are really committed, they are really serious. There are so many reforms over the years. The president himself, he has come up with, there are certain things in our laws now that supposed to position the police to say this is one of the Nigeria police, that can make Nigeria police one of the best. But the problem is that these laws are not being enforced. They are not being enforced. So we're calling upon the Nigerian police force to ensure that the reforms are already on ground. They should be enforced. And this particular case on ground, it should be followed to the latter. We want justice for this particular thing. We want justice at all costs. The perpetrators must be brought to book. Those that have been released, are calling upon them to review it properly. Why should they be released? If it were civilians that were arrested at the scene, would they have been released by now?
Right.
We'll not be hearing things of conspirators, they work together. But because they are police officers, they have been released, leaving just one of them. So the police itself, they have a long way to go if they are really committed in ensuring that the lives of innocent Nigerians is protected. I believe that it will help us, but I've not seen signs to show that they are really committed in doing this.
Now, what would be justice being seen to be done in this case? in your own point of view, what will be justice?
The justice we require in this situation is that the perpetrators be brought to book. And it should be done expeditiously, because justice delayed is justice denied. I've made reference to the Apple case. It took 15 years or 12 years for the trial court to have given judgment. And now the case
Why did it take so long?
I don't know. That is the Nigerian system for you. When you start today, there will be an issue that comes up, preliminary objections here and there. Then a case that should be decided expeditiously before you know it takes so long. So those are the issues we are having in our legal system. So the police should have to play its role to ensure, not just the police now, the Nigerian government, we have to ensure that this case is decided fast. The issue of allowing a case to span for several years, it should not be the case. There should be justice immediately.
Do you think we should have special courts to addressing cases like this? Because if we say our system is already like this, taking 15 years to address, for instance, the Apple matter, should we have special courts that should addressing cases like this expeditiously?
I think that would be a solution. For example, I want to use election tribunals, election cases for an example. Before, when you have cases of that nature, you can spend a long time in court, 4 years in court, to the extent that the person whose election is being challenged will conclude his tenure before judgment is delivered. But we now had a new electoral act that made it mandatory that under 6 months, judgment should have been delivered. Appeal also had a limitation of time. So we can have something like that even for criminal cases. There should be certain objections that should not be entertained, especially when the matter appears to be clear. Like this case now, it's a very straightforward case. We know the person that pulled the trigger. There's no reason why it should delay for more than 3 months. Now, the police have said investigation is going on.
Yes.
I don't know what investigation is going on. We've seen the person that shot him. Why should the case not be in court immediately so that trial should begin? So these are the issues. So
is the NBA pushing for that?
Yes, I can assure you of that. The different branches of Nigerian Bar Association, even women groups like FIDA, AULA, they are ensuring that this matter does not just die like this. We want to ensure that we get to the bottom of this, because the truth is that it can be anybody tomorrow. It has happened to Omobolanle now. We don't know who it happened to maybe yesterday. It can be another person tomorrow. So we want to see that it doesn't just end like this. We need justice. And also, justice can act as a deterrence. So when other police officers see that this is what happened to their colleague, it can go a long way in ensuring that they do not toe this line. So we want justice. We want quick justice. The police should ensure that they play their role, that justice should be done in this matter expeditiously.
Right. Let me come back to you now, Miracle. We've seen she was in the car with her family members. Her daughter was said to be in the car, her sister, the husband. Psychologically, I don't know, how do you think that this is playing out in their minds? Because like we're painting a picture yesterday, it would be difficult for them to get over, this matter, because they saw how she was, shot, and then they couldn't help.
Yeah.
That feeling of helplessness. Not being able to do anything.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how does this play psychologically?
Well, that's a really traumatic event for everyone who was in that car on that day. It was really traumatic, and it most likely is causing them some form of trauma right now, and that's why I would counsel that the family, everyone in that car speaks to, because it's one thing to lose someone. It's another thing to be the presence, being in that same space where the person was shot, right? That's a traumatic event. And
you couldn't help.
You couldn't help, right? That state of helplessness. And so it's really going to be traumatic for everybody in that situation, right? And those are the type of things that lead to things like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, where you just keep having flashes of that incident, and then the person keeps having anxiety and panic attacks and things like that, especially if it's not dealt with and nipped in the bud. So I think that every one of them needs some form of psychological help. They need to maybe get somebody to give them some form of counseling or therapy just to help them go through the grief and the traumatic event, because it's a two-edged sword right now.
Really?
Yes, because of course, if one loses someone, that's grief, right? And the person needs to go through some form of grief therapy. But it's not that thing that someone loses someone to that kind of traumatic event, just like you were in a fire accident, or you saw someone who was shot, you were there when your loved one was raped. All of those things can actually cause for the witness trauma. So yes, they're most likely are having trauma right now, especially for the children in that car. Right. It could actually be devastating. So they need some form of help. Yeah.
Now, if you were to counsel perhaps someone in that situation, how do you go about that?
Okay.
Just a brief insight into how it's managed.
Okay, how it's well. For them, of course, some form of group therapy might come in handy, and of course, individualized therapy as well. We want to just help them create a different meaning to that situation, so that, for instance, is what we call CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which says that your thinking is what affects your emotions and then your behavior. So if we are able to, for instance, help them change how they are seeing that situation or how they are thinking about that incident, it might then help them to feel differently about it, or to feel better about it, and think and behave differently towards that situation. So yeah, so that's an example of some of the things that we do in therapy to really help them. And of course, it's one thing that we say in grief, when people are grieving and things like that, is people around them, they have an important role to play as well. Everybody around them, family members, friends, well-wishers, and things like that. I tell people, when people are grieving, they need your presence more than they need your words, right? Because a lot of the times, people don't know what to say, or how to talk when people are grieving. And sometimes we turn to emergency preachers and motivational speakers when people are grieving, right? So if you don't know what to say, it's better to just be there for the person. Let the person know that I'm here for you, right? Just hold the person's hand, just be there for them, rather than say things that would aggravate how the person is feeling.
Right, we have to leave this conversation here now. I must thank you, clinical psychologist Miracle Ihuoma, and legal practitioner S.E. James Omokaro, for your time on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.